I'm Erica Lynn, and we all know the ocean is the most demanding environment on Earth, consistently testing the reliability and durability of our equipment. When you spend as much time fishing as I do, you know that reliable gear is essential for staying on the water. This is why I went with Abyss Battery to power my trolling motor, electronics, and outboard. The guys at Abyss Battery are rattling the saltwater industry by manufacturing performance marine batteries specifically designed for sonar, outboards, trolling motors, and electronic fishing reels. They're also Bluetooth compatible, so I found checking battery statuses right on your phone while you're out on the water is a huge game changer. To learn more about why Abyss batteries are used by the pros and factory installed by premier boat builders, visit abyssbattery.com.
Hello and welcome to the Publicly Challenged Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Oswald, and I hope you join me on my quest for knowledge to become a better public land hunter, angler, and forager. Stick with this and who knows, maybe we will learn something together. The guest on this episode is Shane Simpson, and we sit down and talk about turkeys. And I gotta say, Shane Simpson is one of those guys that is just super, super humble and willing to talk to you and educate any way he can. And he has a vast amount of knowledge when it comes to turkeys. And you can tell how passionate he is by everything he does. He's got great content out on YouTube, and I believe it's Shane Simpson on YouTube. He's got his website that is Calling All Turkeys. He is a competitive turkey caller, and he has won National Wild Turkey Federation championships, I believe, for turkey calling and for owl or locator calls. I think it's owl calling. And then he's got a Callie the Dog Chronicles, or the tracking dog, and he's got her, and you'll hear her make a little bit of an appearance in this episode. But those are all fun to watch, and you could tell he's really amped up and excited for turkey season to be coming up. And me, who is not really, I wouldn't say proficient turkey hunter. I've only killed a few turkeys in my life. And it's one of those things that when you can reach out and talk to somebody like this that truly knows what's going on, it's an amazing experience just to sit and listen without even asking a question. But of course, had some questions, and I hope it helps me and helps other people on their upcoming turkey hunts this spring. So without any more, we'll just get into the episode because it's pretty good, and I want you guys to hear it. Okay, I'm sitting here, and I got Shane Simpson I'm talking to. And Shane, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us who you are and what you do.
All right, well, my name is Shane Simpson. I'm originally from South Carolina, Rock Hill, South Carolina. Moved up to up here in the Twin Cities of Minnesota about, I think it's going to be 12 years this spring. I don't know what all the viewers want to hear about me. Started turkey hunting when I was young, I guess. Didn't have any access to private land, so I was basically self-taught on public land. That's kind of what I've done all my life, is hunting public land. And I guess about 10 years ago, I got into competition calling. I've done fairly well at that. Won a bunch of state championships, tied for first at Grand Nationals last year in the owl hooting championships. Ended up losing and getting second in the call off, but yeah, I produce a turkey hunting show on YouTube. I'm a YouTuber. It's called Calling All Turkeys. And I travel in the spring and primarily hunt public land and go all over the country and do that sort of thing. So I guess that's it in a nutshell. And if anything else you want me to add, go ahead and ask me.
Well, you've got your website where you actually sell turkey calls that you make as well, right? And
yeah, I make some calls, and also sell some for hooks that I pro staff for, and he kind of supports the show also, and we have a great relationship. So you'll see his on my website, callingallturkeys.com. You'll see calls I actually make myself by hand, and then some of the stuff that he produces.
Okay. I'm sure there's more out there, and I know you got a lot of good content on your YouTube channel, as well as different clips and stuff like that of actual sounds of birds and what they make as well. You kind of break
Yeah.
those down into each. So do you actually raise the turkeys and record that audio yourself, or what are you doing there?
No, I actually did raise turkeys when I was young, and I actually had a wild turkey that I was raising also. He was a mean son of a gun. It was actually it was a car, a person I knew came around a curve and hit a flock of turkeys that was poults in the road and stuff. He couldn't stop and went off in the ditch. And one of the turkeys was pinned under the car and injured. And so he kind of healed it, put it in a pen and let it heal up. And then he gave it to me later, and it was a gobbler, and he was tame as could be. And he used to roost on my handrail at my house. And you tried to get in the house, he would peck at you, and he would chase people would come up there to put gas in, little tanks out behind your house. You put propane or natural gas or whatever in, had a voicemail. This is back when you had voicemail when I got home, ask machine. Mr. Simpson, if you want me to fill up your gas tank, you better put that turkey up, because he chased me all over the yard today. And, so, I mean, I had turkeys growing up, and I had domestic hens and that wild gobbler, and so I got to hear a lot of that stuff. But everything you see on my website or my YouTube channel is actual wild turkey audio, or even barred owls I have on there. I think I have a pileated woodpecker sound, stuff that's all associated with turkey hunting. Come to think of it, I don't have any coyote sounds. I need to get some coyote audio. Well, I do have some, I think, on one foot, but anyway.
So I had, I raise a lot of birds out here where I live too. And I've only been able to have turkeys, I think, twice, because my wife absolutely hates them when she has to go out and feed the birds because they follow her around. She goes, they're such a pretty bird with their body until you look at that head, and that they just chase her all around the yard. And I said, honey, it's not because they're trying to hurt you. It's because they're following that food.
Yeah.
She doesn't really care too much for them. But so I know you got started calling. A guy actually gave you a call, and you started practicing with that, stuff like that.
Yeah. That was one of my first experiences with a mouth call. It's probably one of my first turkey hunts, or out of the first three, I guess. I'm not sure which one, but we had some public land next to where we lived, and I was over there hunting and just kind of walking around, me and my brother, and ran into another hunter, and he said, what are you two young fellas doing? And it's like, we're turkey hunting. Said, do you know how to turkey hunt? It's like, no, we're just walking around hoping to see one, just carrying a gun, didn't have a clue how to turkey hunt. He reached in his little pack, and he had some brand new calls. They were still in the package, and he gave each of us a mouth call, and that was my first experience with a turkey call, and it just so happened to be a mouth call. And I'm kind of glad of that, because that kind of set me on the path to getting good with a mouth call. I mean, all the calls have their pros and cons, but a mouth call just seems to have more pros than cons, and it's really helped me over the years, I think, by getting that initial push into a mouth call use.
I mean, I gotta say, I drive around in my car and I practice, and I've noticed that when you first put it in for about the first 5 minutes or so, it really it sounds terrible, and I don't think it's me, even though I know I sound terrible as well. But is there a reason for that? Why it does that?
You probably don't keep your reeds separated, do you? When you're not using them. So latex is a natural material. It comes from the sap of a tree or whatever. And it'll degrade if you don't take care of it and this and that. But it also, it's, I guess, water soluble. I don't know what the actual term would be to describe it. But, like a call, if you call too much with it, that latex tends to soak up moisture. And that's why if you run a call too long, the reeds start to soak up moisture and get fat, and that'll affect the sound. But also, if you just put the call away when you're done using it, those reeds will dry and stick together like glue. And so when you first put it in your mouth, if you haven't used it in a while and it's dry, the reeds are stuck together. So now instead of having a 3-reed call where each is moving independently, you have basically one thick reed, one reed that's very thick. And so you're not going to get any. You need each reed to, like, the middle reed or the top reed would produce your rasp. The reed right below it would produce your front end note, and the combination of running the two together gives you that 1-2 yelp that clean front end rolling into the rasp. So now you just have all the reeds stuck together. You can't get that. So a good idea, and as you say, the first few minutes you run it, what you're doing is it's starting to soak up moisture, and then the reeds will separate on their own. So a lot of people, what they like to do is take a little break off the end of a toothpick, or they have these plastic reed separators. When you're getting ready to put the caul away, just slide those in between each reed to keep them from touching, and then let them just dry normally, air dry. And then as soon as you put it in your mouth later, they're separated but dry. The sound will, you'll be able to reproduce the sound that it should be.
So do you take like a whole toothpick or just break a piece of it off or something like that?
Yeah, I just break off like the last, I don't know, quarter inch or less than a half inch and just slide it in. Wet, stick the toothpick in your mouth and kind of wet it so it'll slide in there between them. The main thing, I know some people like to separate each reed, like on a 3-reed caul or 4-reed, which is, you don't see too many 4-reed cauls, but 3-reed seems to be the most popular, and some people like to separate each. The main thing, and what I normally do if I separate the reeds, is just the top reed. The very bottom on a 3-reed caul is not really doing anything. It's kind of giving backbone to the mouth caul, kind of like a fishing rod has a medium action or heavy action. Adding that 3rd reed on the bottom just kind of gives it a backbone, allows you to call more aggressively and this and that, but it really doesn't need to be separated from that middle reed that gets you the front end. So the top reed and the reed right below it is what mainly needs to be separated. And like I said, I don't always separate my reeds. Like they're in my pocket right now in my caul case, and they're not separated. But if I was turkey hunting and I'm moving around and I hop in the truck and go to a different spot, and maybe I don't want my reeds to be stuck together as soon as I get out of the truck, and I want it to be ready at an instant, I may slide a reed separator in there or a toothpick just to keep it from sticking together while I'm moving from one location to the other. But I mean, that's the reasoning behind it, and that's so when you get your caul out, it's ready to go. You don't have to. You see people on video sometimes, they're putting the caul up to the mouth and licking the reeds, and then they grabbing it and trying to peel them apart. You're wasting time. Number one, you may be in a pinch where you need to make a caul and you're fiddling with your caul, or the worst case is you start trying to peel them apart and you tear the latex, and it ruins your caul. Yeah.
I've actually done that.
Yeah.
So I've actually done that. That's why I wanted to ask you that.
Yeah.
I think that's good information for everybody to know there. So let's talk about scouting for birds a little bit. When you're picking a hunt area to do, you're probably doing some e-scouting first. What exactly are you looking for? Are you going like a general area where you think there's going to be birds, there's going to be birds, or are you kind of trying to pick apart terrain and find certain things?
Well, a lot of it depends on which state I'm going to. Some states I look mainly for like big tracts of land, for instance. Like in Minnesota here where I hunt, there's one area I hunt, and it's I want to be able to get out of my truck and be able to cover a lot of ground without getting back in the truck and driving anymore. And so it's one contiguous chunk of land. It's 25,000 acres or whatever it is. But then I may go out to South Dakota, and I don't need the big land tracts like or I desire, like in eastern states where there's a lot of woods. And out there, there may just be a drainage with some cottonwoods. If there's a river or something with cottonwoods or big trees for roosting, I know that's where I need to focus on. And then those birds out there will travel the prairies without trees for miles. And so I just need to hone in on where the birds are roosting, and then I can chase them all day once I know where they're going to come back and forth to each morning and evening and that sort of thing. So yeah, a lot of e-scouting is what I start off with. I don't actually get a whole lot of boots on the ground scouting anymore these days, just because my hunting takes me all over the country, and I may drive through the night and get to my spot at 3 a.m. and start hunting that next morning. So my scouting basically comprises of me actually hunting and scouting at the same time these days. But yeah, when I'm looking at e-scouting, looking at a chunk, I first decide which tracks or which part of the state do I want to hunt. What do I want a big tract to go after, or do I want to go to a small one? And then I'm looking for different types of terrain features. Like let's say we're in bluff country, for instance. I'll use Minnesota again. I like to have, and I'm looking at my topo also. I like to have little finger ridges, points that come out off these bluffs that have a little flat and have woods there. There's fields, a lot of ag up here, and a lot of the public land has ag. That I guess the DNR leases the rights to the farmers to plant on it. But it seems like the turkeys like to hang out on those points, those wooded points that have just a little bit of a flat on them, and not a sharp rollover on either side of that ridge. I'm looking for points like that, and I'm looking for multiple ones where I can hop from one to the other, for instance. But then if I'm going to say like a place like Mississippi where I hunted this past spring, one of the goals was to look for difficulty in access, something that's going to get me away from other hunters. And it's not so much, it's desirable for what the turkeys like. It was what's going to be undesirable for the hunters that want to go in there. And so I was looking for water access and this and that. And then I was trying to find, transitions also, just like when you're deer hunting, you excuse me, deer hunters look for transition lines, pines turning into, clear cut or hardwoods and this and that. I'm also looking for that with turkeys, especially on flat terrain, say down in Mississippi in these bottoms. What's going to be different than everything else? And that's where trees change. And I would find a stand of pines, and then it would mix with hardwoods, and then maybe there's some old, they had thinned the woods at one point, and there's a lot of undergrowth coming in. So there's another transition area there, and it gives a mix of cover for the turkeys. And I figured those are going to be areas that turkeys are going to kind of bounce around back and forth, depending on what they're eating or if they're displaying or trying to find a hen to mate with the gobblers are. And so that's kind of a brief summary of some of the things. We can go in more detail if you like, but that's probably it in a nutshell.
That's good. If you want to elaborate more on it, it's up to you. But so you're basically looking for either like points that connect to ag, like a transition type or transition between trees, things like that. It's kind of similar to like funnels that you'd find for deer and things like that then.
All of it's kind of, I guess, region specific. If I was hunting, like I'm hunting up here in Minnesota and this particular track, it's bluff country, a lot of hills, and there's some ag mixed in. So there's different areas that I want to focus in on. Number one, this place gets hunted hard because it's public land, and the field are not where you really want to hunt. There's a lot of hunters that go up there and pop a ground blind up there, and they see people up there walking. And of course, turkeys and deer and everything else are accustomed to seeing the occasional person hiking, looking for morel mushrooms, farmers. But what I've noticed over the years is they really are difficult to call in when you're trying to hunt those fields. But if you get into the woods, they're a little bit more relaxed, a little more comfortable because they have cover, number one, and they probably don't get hunted a whole lot in the woods. Most of the people up here that they like to hunt the fields. And so I'm looking for features like that, back in the woods. And I noticed that these little ridges with these little flats, that's where the turkeys like to hang out when they're not in the field. They kind of, mill around or strut or stand there on those flats and gobble and try to call up hens. It's the other points that are just real sharp that really don't give you a nice flat area for them to stand on. And that's kind of what I look for, those areas. And that's where I usually find the turkeys, on those little flats out there on those points. And if I can find multiple ones, then I move around. And then I go to, say, like Florida, it's flat, and I'm not worried about, there's not a lot of fields, it's swamps and stuff. So down there, that you got to have knowledge, I guess, of the area you're going. Down there, I know that the turkeys like cypress heads, and that's where they tend to roost. So that's not necessarily where they spend all day. So that's going to be areas that I look for. So the cypress heads is where they typically like to roost. They may not spend all day there. They'll walk around, but that's good places to find on a map to pinpoint, because once they fly down, there's a good possibility they're still in the general area. And so it's really going to depend on what state, what type of terrain you're hunting, that dictates how you approach each one. And that really comes with a lot of experience hunting those areas. But you can also get it from talking to people that actually, hunt those areas. I could easily just pick up the phone or I could pick up the phone. I have friends down there, but if I didn't know anything about Florida, I could go on some of these forums or Facebook pages these days and just ask general questions like that. Don't ask, hey, what's a good WMA to hunt? But ask, if I was hunting this WMA, I'm looking at the satellite images, what kind of key features would I want to focus on? And people will tell you that kind of info.
And then you could always look through old posts and see if they got a picture with them in front of the sign.
I've done that. I used to, early on before I started hunting Florida, when I first started hunting Florida, there were a lot of vlogs, that people would go hunting and bike into these swamps, and they would post pictures, and they would tell exactly what WMA they were at, and they would show these pictures. And so, I mean, some of them were so telling that I could almost figure out where they were killing their birds at. So I did a lot of that early on. Just people would create these web blogs or their own personal journals, blogs with text and pictures, and so those were very learned a lot from those basically.
There's a buddy I have on social media that says he does that same thing with morels, and he goes, I love it when people post a picture of all the morels they found and it's got a location, or they'll take a picture of it by a tree and it's got a location and tells them the park they're in or wherever they're at. And he goes, if it's within 3 miles, I'm headed there.
Yeah.
It's a good telltale. So if you're listening to this, turn on your location when you take a picture for us, please.
Yeah. And I would love to, in my videos, because I hunt a lot of public land and I'm trying to, educate also on some of the strategies and why I'm doing things. I would love to be able to show satellite images, but I know that it doesn't take much to figure out where you're hunting. For instance, I was hunting watching the hunting public. And do you watch those guys any at all?
I do. I really like their content. It's one of the few shows I watch.
Well, I'm not going to get into specifics, but I was watching one of their hunts, and based on the few images I could gather from their phone, they show them you're looking at their phone, and their video, I was able to pinpoint almost to the tree where one of the guys shot a deer from. And I messaged him and asked him, and he said, well, drop me a pin where you think it was. And I dropped it. And he said, well, that's pretty close. So, I mean, I had no intention of ever hunting there, but it shows you it doesn't take you much to put the puzzles together, pieces together, and figure out where someone's hunting. And then that's the last thing I want to do. I mean, I've thought about using but grabbing satellite images from another area that's similar and kind of use that just to help, visually show the viewers why I'm making the route that I am on a bird. And so, if I just show me walk through the woods, you really have no idea of the terrain features and stuff and why I'm making the decisions I'm making. So I can do that, but it's very difficult to show the actual satellite images without the place ending up getting ruined by 10,000 people wanting to hunt that same spot just because I killed a gobbler there.
Right. So let's talk about that a little bit then, as far as like your route and things like that. So I'm not one to sit still too long. I mean, I obviously do it when I'm deer hunting because you almost have to sometimes if you know they're coming through. But so say you're turkey hunting, it's a spot you haven't hunted before, but you scouted it. You're going to get out of your truck and head to where your first location wants to be, or are you going to do some calls or something like that? What are you initially trying to do?
Well, one of the first things I probably already have in mind is where I'm going hunting and where I'm going to listen for that first morning. Say it's a new place, I'm traveling out of state, I've already picked on the map where I want to start. And that's usually a spot that I want to listen and then go from there. I'll go stand there. And sometimes a lot of people, you'll see in the videos, I'm just basing this on YouTube videos that I see of other people or people I've hunted with. They'll go to an area and they'll just stand there and wait for it to get light. And then all of a sudden, the owl hoot when it's getting light or whatever, and the bird sounds off really close. Now they're scrambling to get set up. Well, one of the things I like to do, because I get there well before light a lot of times, is I'll actually get set up, find a tree that I can sit against. And that way, if something sounds off nearby, I'm already set up. I may have to shift my body, to the right or left or whatever, depending on where the bird sounds off at. But I'm prepared to hunt that location if I hear one close by. Not all time, not every time do I sit down next to a tree, but I at least have a kind of an idea. Okay, if one sounds off nearby, I'm gonna sit right next to that tree or that sort of thing. But a lot of times what I do is I actually plot a course. I've studied these maps as I'm going, say, to Tennessee or something. Okay, where are the roads at? Where can I cover the most ground in one day? Like I can park here, I can take this route, and I plot that course on the map, and it may take me a 3-mile loop, and then I can hit this road and walk this road a mile back to my truck. So I want to cover a lot of ground. I don't want to just. I guess I've done it in the past where you just kind of get out and run a locator call or a turkey call to get one sound off, and then you hop in your truck and drive to another spot. A lot of times my first day at one location or a new state to hunt is I plot a course to cover a lot of ground, and that's kind of my plan. Sometimes I don't have to cover a lot of ground. I kill a turkey pretty quick. Then other times I may spend an enormous amount of time covering ground, but I hope that was the answer you were looking for. The question.
So then, like here in Illinois, I can only hunt them until I think 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, mostly because they don't want you putting them to bed in the trees at night is one of the reasons why, because they think, I guess their thought behind it is they don't want you to shoot them coming right off the roost or while they're going to the roost. So you can't set up underneath the trees. And then also they want you to share the woods with the mushroom hunters as well. So you're not allowed to mushroom hunt until after 2 o'clock. But
really?
On state ground anyway,
that's weird.
That's the way it works.
Yeah.
So like with that being said, go into the woods, set up in a spot, start calling. If you don't hear anything, keep moving to your next spot you kind of got plotted out or where you think might be a good terrain for a turkey till you hear something. Then you're going to set up on them. So what would, what's the calls that you would want to use the most? Like what are the most, let's call it the 5 most important calls.
All right. Well, number one, I usually try to feel this bird out a little bit. I started off kind of, light, maybe some yelps, maybe a couple cuts in there just to see what his demeanor is. Basically, I'm gonna kind of start off, kind of feel the bird out a little bit. Can't say that I always stick to that regimen or that routine, but I kind of want to feel how he's responding to me. If I yelp to him a few times or cut to him and he cuts me off and gobbles pretty good, then I'll continue on that. I'm also kind of thinking the terrain. If you watch my videos, a lot of times you'll see me look at my phone often, and I think some people think that I'm just scrolling through Facebook or something. But I'm looking at, okay, what's nearby? What's over where he's at? What's in the direction to the right of him? If maybe he's heading that way, is there a field? Do I need to move to cut him off? And if I'm satisfied with the location I'm at, then I'm just kind of feeling him out and listening to his response. He's making good, covering a lot of ground, getting to me. I don't need to pour it on. I mean, he's obviously heading my way. I may just sit there quietly. But trying to think of hunts that I can relate back to. Maybe one of my Minnesota hunts, the bird was fired up, and I didn't call a whole lot to him, but he wasn't moving. He was staying in one spot. So then I poured it on, and he still wouldn't move. So then I decided to move closer to him, change positions. And at first I thought I'd spooked him because he shut up. Well, what he had done was, I guess because I'd stopped calling and started moving towards him, he stopped gobbling and started moving towards me, but he took a different route. He went around the top of the ridge, and I was trying to cut through the valley. When I got over to close to where I thought he was, and I called, and nothing answered, and I just sat there, and then finally he gobbled. He was back up where I started. So probably if I had just gone totally quiet, he may have come up there anyway. So I made a bad decision at that point. But he basically got to where his roost tree was, where he started the morning. He flew down across the valley, and he started gobbling up there. But it was kind of half-hearted gobbles. But across the valley, like twice as far away, was another bird. He was just hammering. Every time I'd even make a peep, he would hammer back. And I was like, that bird's pretty hot. Maybe I should just abandon this and go after that. And I was like, I don't know. Maybe I'll give this one more try. He's back up on that point. I can probably circle down around and come up the backside and just change positions again. So I started down the hill and I wasn't calling, and he started gobbling even more. And I'm like, yeah, he's getting fired up again. But this time he just stayed in the spot he was at, and I was able to get on the backside of this point and come up it. And as soon as I made my first couple, I scratched the leaves a little bit and made some clucks and purrs and little bubble clucks. He hammered at it, but he would not come any closer, and he had to be within like 30 yards of me. And finally, I just quit calling, and he just gobbled, and there was two little slopes on either side of this point. I could hear him spitting and drumming. You got to be listening for that sort of stuff also, not just the gobble back, but listen for him moving through the woods if there's enough leaf cover, but the spitting and drumming. And I could pinpoint exactly where he was with each spit and drum, that he was getting closer, but he was coming off around, circling around me. So I basically just belly crawled to the little edge of the point where I could peek over. And sure enough, there he was working his way around me. And he didn't see me crawl over there, obviously. And he saw me when I come up with the gun, but he took a step to start to leave, but it was too late then. I mean, like every situation is different. I lean towards more aggressive calling. So a lot of times you'll see me call aggressively more often than not, in my opinion, and based on my years of turkey hunting, it seems like aggressive calling results in more kills more often than that subtle approach where you just scratch the leaves and then a couple of clucks. You see that advice given a lot of people give often is, oh, just cluck a few times and maybe scratch leaves and then just sit there and wait. He'll come. I'm like, yeah, he'll come maybe 3 hours from now or 6 hours from now. I want that bird to come now, you know. And what I've seen is it just seems like the aggressive type of calling, it either brings him in or it brings in a satellite gobbler. And I've had good success doing that.
So when you say aggressive, are you meaning like aggressive as in a Jake that's wanting to come into a hen, or are you doing mostly hen calls?
When I say aggressive, I mean like a lot of cutting, some excited yelping. It's like that, peck, 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 yelp, 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 yelp. And I guess you could throw in there if you added Jake yelps, or if you try to sound like multiple birds, or you ran two calls at one time. Like sometimes I'll run a pot call and a mouth call at the same time, sound like multiple hens. Yeah, I guess all that would be aggressive style calling. But typically, when I just refer to aggressive calling, I'm talking about if I was trying to sound like one hen, I'm trying to sound like a fired up hen, and she's just cutting back and forth to this bird that's gobbling. And I guess the reason I got into that type of calling is I've had hens come in to my calling, my basic hen yelps or whatever, and they'd come in and they would start cutting, and I would instantly hear a change in the birds in the distance. They'd start gobbling more often. It seemed like they were getting closer. Sometimes they would come on in. I actually had that happen one time in Wisconsin. I had this hen come in to my calling, and she kind of saw me laying against this log that was laying on the ground. It had some tall grass around it, and she couldn't quite figure out what I was. And she walked right up to me, and I'm like, she was walking by me to the bird that was gobbling off to my left. I said, if she makes one more step, I'm going to scare her. And when she made one more step towards that bird, I leaned up and flailed, whatever. I just moved my arms around. I can't say the word. To scare her. And she went straight up in the air and then landed about 30 yards to the right. Well, that freaking hen started cutting, just pack, 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 and walking back to me. She walked about 5 feet of my foot. She didn't know what I was that moved. She was irritated and trying to get me to move. She got about 5 feet from me, and I yelled at her this time and jumped and scared her. And she did the same thing, went up about 30 yards in the air and landed off to my right. And she kept on cutting. Because I didn't chase her, I guess that's why she stuck around. She just saw an object just move each time, and she was trying to figure out what it was. And probably being in an agricultural environment, they weren't as wild as say a bird in Alabama or Georgia, or something that would have hauled butt. But all that cutting she was doing, those birds were fired up behind me, and so I started cutting back to her. And so it was just two of us, back, 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 back. And and those birds getting louder and louder, and then finally they just quit gobbling, and the hen she lost interest, and she drifted off to her right and went into the woods. And it wasn't, maybe 30 seconds later, I heard, and caught movement out of my left. Here come those two gobblers that was off in the distance. They had heard that commotion, and it brought them right in. So, I mean, I guess I got off on a little sidetrack there. But yeah, that's aggressive calling. In my when I talk about it, it's basically me replicating one aggressive hen. But all that I said earlier could be included in that. Sound like multiple birds, etc.
So when you cut, how do you actually do that? Is that
on a mouth call?
Yeah.
Assuming you're talking about. You're basically using your tongue to stop the reeds, and you're using a lot of air to get that volume, and so your tongue is going up and down. And every time it goes down, you got to force a lot of air and then slam your tongue up against the reeds quickly. And so it's a little burst of air. And I'm trying to think of how I would describe that. I guess if you were huffing, well, not really huffing, that's coming down the wrong. I've never really given it much thought, I guess. But it's basically a forceful amount of air out of your mouth, and you're just opening, slightly lowering your tongue each time and slamming it back shut to stop those reeds instantly, and it gives you that loud pop, 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 pop. And just a little bit of practice, you can get to where you can kind of do it louder and more aggressively and quickly.
Yeah, because that's one thing I've tried doing, and for some reason I can't get a cut. I can't get it down. But after you explaining that, it makes a little more sense to try and do that.
Yeah, and I need to really think about that one day and try to figure out how to best describe how to get that air across. To create that cut. I guess I've really never given it much thought.
So when you're doing, like, say you're doing your yelps, you're doing hen yelps, get the gobbler to come in, and then depending on whether he's fired up or not, you're gonna start cutting and yelping as well. What are some other things? Say you got one that's kind of he sounds off, but you can't get him to come in or something like that. What are you trying to do?
Well, I mean, I guess I start digging in my bag of tricks, and I'm grasping at straws sometimes, but not really. I mean, a lot of these tactics will be very good tactics to try, and that's like, for instance, J-kill. I've used that quite often, and that is a very effective call. If you can start, while you're hen yelping, and the bird is gobbling, but he doesn't sound totally interested, or maybe he's adamant about staying where he's at. Throwing some of those little yawky J-kills, and a lot of times that'll bring in the gobbler. Thinks, okay, there's a Jake around, or there's another male turkey around, and for some reason, it's not always. It seems like to me that it's not always the hen that the bird is interested in. I mean, you could throw hen calls out there, and the bird, he's just not interested in going to a hen for whatever reason. But if you replicate a gobble, for instance, or J-kill, that male turkey, sometimes they just want to go to other male turkeys to hang out, not necessarily to fight. And then sometimes it's a dominance thing. They just want to, okay, you're in my area here, or I'm the dominant bird, and they're coming there to show their dominance, or whatever. You never know what's going through a gobbler's head, but J-kills and gobbles, for instance, can be very effective. I've seen over the years, and it's something I will try to use occasionally. And then you get on down into your bag of tricks, and you start grasping at straws. You can throw in fighting birds. It sounds like two, jakes or two gobblers fighting, and sometimes that'll pull them in there. And sometimes some of those little tricks work sometimes.
So what would be the difference between like a regular, like a cluck and a purr versus a fighting purr or something like that? Then what differentiates them, I guess would be the word I'm looking for.
Well, I mean, if we're speaking of cluck and purr of a contented hen that's feeding, for instance, I mean, that's real subtle and soft. And the terms, I think, should be changed technically to describe each. So a hen that's feeding, I would call that a pippin purr. It's kind of a, got a little pippy sound to them, and it's real quiet. Whereas a cluck and purr, or what I like to call a cut and purr, of maybe a hen that heard you call and she comes in. If you've hunted long enough, you probably have one of these loudmouth hens come in. It is more of a cut than it is a cluck. And they're trying to find this hen that's a little agitated. And I wouldn't say they're always coming in for a fight. And I think a lot of people think that's what that sound means and the reason that hen came in for. I think sometimes it's just a hen that wants to be with another hen. And a lot of times these birds that come in, you hear them cut purr, and doing all that stuff. They're usually juvenile birds. And you can look, a lot of people don't pay attention to this or don't know this, but you can look at the wing patch of a turkey and tell whether it's a juvenile or an adult. With gobblers, it's a lot easier. You just look at their beards or their fan or the spurs, whatever, if you can see all that. But a lot of people see a hen and like, oh yeah, this false hen came in and started, carried on. And then, I'll see videos on YouTube and they'll say that, but you look at it and it's a little juvenile hen. It's basically the equivalent of a jake. It's just a 1-year-old hen. And you can look at her wing patch and tell that because it's not filled out fully. And that's usually 90% of the time, that's usually what comes into your call, and it's not a false hen. It's just a juvenile hen looking for other birds to hang out with, and they're not ready to fight or whatever. Anyway, I'm off.
It's fine. It's fine. We'll circle back to it. So the jake, yeah.
So you got the what I call the tip and purr, the kind of the feeding hen, and then that cut and purr of a kind of an agitated or just a curious hen coming in. She's loud and she's cutting and purring, and then fighting purr. That's just that's aggressive. That's irritated. They're fighting. It builds up too as they get close to each other. It's like it's real loud, and then they start fighting, and you don't hear a lot of clucks and cuts in that. It's more of a and then some people describe it as a rattle, and it's if you're close to it, you can hear kind of that rattle sound. I guess they would describe it as. So I mean, usually that's when they're fighting. That fighting purr, obviously the term, and it's very loud, and you can hear from a long ways off. And then you'll hear wing slaps and wing beats as they pound each other and stuff, and carry on. But yeah, I hope that describes it.
I think so.
Can you add in some audio to the podcast when you edit it? And we can show a little demonstration to each if you'd like.
Yeah, I can do that too. Yeah.
Okay, because I have the audio.
Okay.
It'll be better than me trying to describe my mouth.
I don't know. To me, it sounds pretty good, but yeah, I could add it in, or even just I could put links to your stuff too. So.
Yeah, I have a mouth call with me. I should have had this ready. I could have demonstrated on it a little easier. But go ahead if you want with the next question.
Well, my next question was going to be, so besides that, what else are you kind of throwing at them? As far as, I know it's all kind of scenario based here, but what?
I mean, it's not always turkey calls that I throw at them. Sometimes I'm using locator calls, and like a barred owl call is my favorite to use. And I have a crow call that I carry with me, but I rarely use it. But sometimes you don't want that bird to advance to you. And the best way to do that is use a locator call. And I use, like I said, an owl call all up through the day. Some people seem to be in this mentality, oh, owls don't hoot during the day. You can't use an owl call. They'll know something's up. Well, I hear barred owls hoot at all times of day. Obviously, it's not as frequent during the middle of the day as it is in the early morning, the evening, and at night, but they still do it. And turkeys have heard that. So it's not something out of the norm for them. But if I've got a bird on a spot that is gobbling, and maybe I'm in a location that is not desirable to call him to, I may want to move around him to get to one side or the other and set up. And I may hit him with an owl hooter, when I'm making that last 30 yards to get in position because, okay, I need to figure out where he's at so I don't bump him out of here. I'll hit an owl hooter just to give him the gobble once, and then I can make that last 30 yards. So, you can't always think in the terms of turkey calls on killing a bird. Sometimes you just got to pull out a locator call and help you and your strategies on moving on that bird before you get set up to start calling.
So are you one that uses? Actually, I heard you use a goose call sometimes too, because you said you were hunting one time and a goose flew over and was honking. And is that something that's normally in your bag of tricks?
Where did you see that anyway? Where did you hear that at?
You know, I don't recall, but it might have been on another podcast, or it might have even been you were doing an interview with somebody or something. And you mentioned the goose call.
Yeah, I have one up in my office right now, but I haven't carried it in my turkey vest for quite some time, and that's mainly because I figured out how to coyote howl on a mouth call, and that's kind of been my replacement call. It seems to be more effective than the goose call. But yeah, I was hunting in South Carolina, and this was many years ago, and no matter what I threw out there, I didn't know there was birds nearby. I just was hoping there was something nearby. I couldn't get a bird to gobble. I think, well, I heard them earlier that morning, but I couldn't relocate them, and I was walking a ridge, and I couldn't get any birds to gobble. About that time, a lone goose flew over and just started, and he gobbled to it. And I started carrying a goose call like that, and I had some success with it. It worked pretty good. You know, I pulled it out as the last ditch effort. But nowadays, I just use my turkey mouth call to coyote howl on, and that if I can't get one to gobble with an owl call or say a cutting on a pot call, which is another favorite of mine. If I'm trying to locate a bird, I may get a pot call out, just cut real aggressive on it. That coyote howl a lot of times will elicit a gobble.
So do you do like a yip and howl with your mouth call, or what are you doing?
Yeah, I kind of bark and howl. It's I use the rasp or relax my tongue and get that that barky sound. And then I do basically if you're doing a key on a turkey call, it beep 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 beep. So it's basically a drawn out key, and I get that the howl at the end. You want to hear it real quick?
Sure.
Hopefully this call is ready. It's I didn't have it separated with the reed separated. You hear that little bit of rasp right there? That's where I get my bark. I don't know how that's going to sound over the mic.
Oh, it actually sounds pretty good.
It brought my dog down. He come running down here to see what it's called.
Is that Callie, the dog? Is it Callie?
Yeah, that's Callie. She's on my the tracking dog, tracking dog.
The Callie Chronicles.
Yeah. When I can say, because I got to say this real quietly, if I say you want to go on a mission, she hears the word mission, and boy, she perks up. You want to go on a mission? Her ears just perked up. I haven't been on one in weeks. She's over there nudging her leash now because she thinks we're getting ready to go on one. I was just kidding, girl. So lay down.
But so, I mean, I guess, I don't know. I guess that's kind of the questions I have for you as far as setup and stuff like that. I'm not really too sure what else. What's something that you absolutely don't want to do as far as a call out in the woods?
I don't know. I guess you don't want to do an alarm putt. And some people think that a cluck is a dangerous call to do because it can sound somewhat like a cluck or a putt, alarm putt. And I guess I don't know if anyone's ever paid attention to it, and I think I've mentioned this to a few people. I watch my videos and you'll see that I typically end any cutting sequence or any cut clucks. I throw in a few soft yelps at the end, and that's just mentally me wanting the turkey me trying to tell the turkey, hey, that wasn't cuts I was doing. That was just some clucks, and I threw in some soft yelps to reaffirm that. So you'll see me a lot of times, or even if I'm doing them soft, I always add a few yelps at the end. And you can see it if you watch a bird up close, their body language. I've had jakes in close, and I'm just kind of messing around with them, and I'll go, and you'll see them all the snoot on their heads kind of draw up real quick, and you'll see them flinch. But as soon as I go right at the end, you see them all relax. Just they kind of hunker down a little bit, and you can see the snoot start to lengthen. That's, I guess, probably what drove me to start doing that, because I can imagine a bird out there at 50 or 60 yards, and I'll go, and I can imagine them perking up, and then I'll go, and I'll imagine them just kind of relaxing. Okay, everything's cool over there. I got it.
So, when you're hunting, do you ever go without a decoy, or are you always carrying a decoy with you?
Definitely don't always carry a decoy. I'm just trying to think how often it is. I was actually looking at some of my hunts the other day, and if I had to guess, I'll say about not quite half, but a large portion of my hunts are without a decoy. I may have one with me. I won't say that that many that I didn't have a decoy in my possession, because I mean it is obviously a tool to use um, in the right situation. And the reason that say about half my hunts or a little more are with a decoy, and then about half are without, is because I use a decoy as a tool and not a crutch. And a lot of people use them as crutches. And what I mean by that is they get in this mentality of, oh, I've got to put it out. I've got to put it out. Not the mentality that if I put it out, it's going to work, but they just get into this routine that, oh, I need something for them to focus in on. Hey, girl, she had some input. So don't get caught up in there. Of course, I'll have one with me sometimes, but only if the situation dictates that I need to put one out. And being that I'm self-filming, I don't just put a decoy out just to be putting out there. Certain situations dictate that. But what's nice, because I self-film most of my hunts, every once in a while I have someone to film, and it gets a little easier. The decoy gives them something to focus on. And the decoy doesn't always just lure the bird in. Sometimes these birds are in gun range when they come into sight of the decoy. But it gives them something to focus on for me to move my camera, move my hands, get my hands in position to shoot one of them. So it's a nice aspect, a nice tool in that aspect. But there are situations that they're not needed. I'm hunting the swamp bottoms in Wisconsin, and there's thick vegetation. There's a good chance they're not going to see it by the time, especially when I'm filming someone, they're not going to see the decoy by the time they get in gun range. So you don't even need to fiddle around with putting one out or worry about carrying the extra weight, depending on how heavy the decoy is you use. If you're using one of those little foam ones, then there's no issue there. But some of the other ones may weigh a pound or two, and just adds more bulk to your vest. They're definitely a great tool to use, but you got to look at, it's just like with anything. You got to look at what are the benefits of using one, and what are the benefits of going without one, and just each hunt dictates that, I guess. If I know I'm going to an area that's going to be like I described earlier, thick cover, I won't even bother carrying one. The Wisconsin swamp bottoms I was talking about, there's several videos that I hunt the river bottoms, and I never even carry a decoy back in it. Usually the stuff is knee high, the vegetation. I mean, when you sit down, you're just going to see a turkey's head coming through the brush anyway. They're not going to see a decoy unless you got it sitting on a 6-foot pole. But then there are other times that it comes in handy, like my daughter's hunt down in Florida. I don't think with me trying to manage her, filming it and trying to help her get her gun up, and do multiple things, if I didn't have something out there to focus that bird to focus attention on, then she wouldn't have been able to kill that bird if we were just sitting there without one. So I mean, but like I said, just don't use them as a crutch. Don't just put them out every single time just because you think it's going to work for you. Weigh the options and weigh the pros and cons of each situation. Sometimes it may scare the bird off. I can't say that I've actually had that happen. I guess I've seen people have problems with strutters scaring birds off, but I've never really hunted with a strutter, so I've never had that issue with my Jake decoy.
So are you using just like a regular, I guess it'd be like a walking, or what's it called when the decoy then?
Well, my go-to these days is just a quarter strut Jake, non-aggressive. I have some hand decoys, I've used them here and there, but it's almost my decision right now is almost I don't even want to carry a hen anymore. I mean, you got to think like this. I'm hen calling, so obviously there's a hen somewhere. They just can't see that hen, so that I'm a an audio decoy, and then I got a Jake out there. That and here's the thing about the reason I use a Jake. If you had a hen decoy out in front of you, and here comes your gobbler in, he stops out there outside of gun range and starts strutting because he's displaying that hen. He wants her to come the rest of the way, right? Well, swap that hen for a Jake decoy, a male decoy out there. He hears a hen nearby. He's not really, the odds of him hanging up out there and just displaying are much lower because now he's got to engage this other male turkey, and the only way for him to do that is to come up to it, and so then it brings you into gun range. So I've had so much more success using a male decoy over a hen decoy, and just because I walk a lot. That's another reason I only carry just the Jake decoy, not hens. But like I said earlier, I'm making hen sounds. They obviously hear a hen nearby. They know one's nearby. They just don't see her. So to me, it just makes sense to carry that one Jake decoy and a non-aggressive posture. The strutting, more aggressive type decoys, sometimes they scare birds off if it's a subordinate. Sometimes they don't if it's a more dominant bird. I haven't seen with a non-aggressive Jake decoy, it scare any birds off. So that's why I continue to use it.
That makes sense. So you mentioned like knee-high and waist-high vegetation. So one of the things I want to ask you is actual like tick control or mosquito and tick and all that kind of stuff. You treat your clothes, or what do you do to take precautions as far as that goes?
Well, I have
Permethrin?
yeah, permethrin. I have that stuff that I'll spray my clothes. But I also have some clothing that a Minnesota company up here produces called Elimitic. It's made by Game Hide,
Mm-hmm.
and it has it infused in the fibers. I still have some of that clothing I wear, depending on how hot it is or how cold it is. Um, Sometimes I just wear the pants of that, and my shirts are not even treated, and that seems to work. I rarely ever find ticks on me. Um, I have been diagnosed with Lyme disease, but believe it or not, I did not get bit by the tick that gave me Lyme disease while I was turkey hunting. I got it in the backyard here in the middle of the summer, of
Oh
all
no.
places. Yeah. It was like in July or something like that, and I found ticks on me, and I didn't know how long it'd been there. A few days or whatever. But of all places, I rarely find ticks on me when I'm turkey hunting. Every once in a while, but usually I have that permethrin treated clothing on, or I have that limited some of that clothing.
All right. Thanks for that. Because that's one thing that I always kind of think about, especially when you mentioned you're taking your daughter out on a hunt too. You kind of always want to protect your kids as well from that kind of stuff. But before we wrap this up, I kind of want to ask you, because right now all the tags are coming in and all that kind of stuff. What are your plans for the season?
Well, I have my go-to spots I like to go. I always like to go to South Dakota, so that's going to be in there. I'm going to hunt in Florida again this year. And I told if people that have watched the show, Doug Updike is kind of a regular. He kicks it off in Florida many years. And I told him, I said, I don't know if I'll come back next year. I said, we've done a bunch in a row, but this Florida trip, I'm in Minnesota, and Florida is 30-hour drive away. It becomes a long haul down there, and I said maybe next year we'll skip that. I'm getting off subject again. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
Anywho, my plans are I'm going to Mississippi, I'm going to Florida, I am going to Tennessee, I'm going to Nebraska, South Dakota, Minnesota, obviously, and Wisconsin. And then I have 3 states I'm on the fence about, and I'm trying to decide: Iowa, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. And I know one of those will make it into the mix. Right now, I don't know which one, and maybe all 3 will make it into the mix. We'll just got to see how things are going along, and just see how my schedule can fit all that in there. So that's kind of my plans right now.
So you got any plans? I saw a picture of you telling a story recently, and I think you were with Sam Sohalt and the Hunting Public Boys or something like that.
Kind of, yeah, we were in Tennessee. That was just pure coincidence that we ended up in there. I was in Mississippi last year, and I had talked to Catman, Jonathan Bohm, about hunting Tennessee, and we had talked about early in the year, like in February or something, January, about hunting in Tennessee. He's like, "When are you going to come?" And I was like, "I don't know, maybe first week of April. That first week the season's open." I didn't get there opener. I got there a little bit after opener, I guess, a day or two. Um, and then I talked to the guys with, I guess Aaron's uh, other guys he used to work with on Spring Thunder, Andy and gosh, sorry, Andy, I'm forgetting your last name. Anyway, I'll remember as soon as I get off this podcast with you. I ran into those guys in Nashville, and they were telling me, "Hey, the hunting public's going to be in town that same week you're going to be there, and we're probably going to be there also." I was like, "Really?" So what are the odds of that? So I left Mississippi, and I stayed down there a couple of days longer than I should have, and got up there to Tennessee and met up with Catman and hung out with the hunting public guys for a little bit. So that was pretty cool. And yeah, we were telling stories and stuff, and I don't even remember what I was asking, telling the story. They posted a picture of me bent over describing something, and everyone was laughing except for Sam Soho.
Yeah.
Obviously, he didn't find whatever I was discussing funny.
Yeah, it looked like a funny picture anyway, but I just figured I'd bring that up, and I hope you have a good season. And I got 1 week to kill a bird, so hopefully talking to you helped me out a little bit, and I got some practicing to do, I think.
Yeah, you're going to just try and hunt Illinois, or you're going to try and hunt some other areas?
I got 3 little ones, so under the age of 5, so I try and stick close to home as much as I can, and I normally get 1 trip away. So it'll be sticking close to home, and the way my tag works is I got 1 week to get a bird.
I think you were getting ready to ask if I was having any plans of hunting with the hunting public this year. Is that what you were leading up to?
No, I was just seeing what was going on. I don't even remember exactly. I saw that picture. I thought it was a pretty funny looking story, whatever it was, and that's all.
Yeah, I'm anxious to see what their schedule's going to be because not that I'm going to be hunting with them. I enjoy watching their show as much as anyone. I enjoy watching turkey hunting. Dave Owens, Pinhoti Project, he just put out one this morning, a new video this morning from last season. He was hunting up here in Minnesota, of all places. I'm ready for turkey season. I'm ready for all these guys to get moving and start putting out some content because it's fun to watch. Catman and all those guys. I don't know if you wanted them mentioned on your podcast, but
oh no, it's totally fine.
Yeah, there's some great YouTube content coming out from these guys. It sure beats watching the same old on TV.
I actually don't even. I quit watching pretty much all TV shows on the outdoor channels, if you will, just because it's all the same stuff. I don't care much for something where it's pretty much a trigger man. I want to see people actually actively hunting. You see all these people, they show up, they kill something, and it doesn't even seem like they're passionate about it. And that's, I think, what I like about the YouTube channel is there's guys like you out there, there's guys like the hunting public and all that, to where it's truly their passion and they're doing it all on their own without some big production company setting everything up. And that's what makes it interesting.
Yeah, and the aspect you touched on is you're seeing them from the time they get there in a place that wasn't, groomed for their arrival, say as an outfitter or something. And if people want to hunt that way, that's fine. But to me, what and I think a lot of people like is seeing you look in an area that you've never been to, basically looking at satellite images and maps or whatever, and then going there and figuring it out on the go and filming and documenting this. And and whether they kill a bird or not is irrelevant, but we're seeing that on these shows like the Hunting Public and Dave Owens and then Catman. He travels a little bit out of state, and there's a few here and there. And there's not a whole lot of great channels out there. And what I mean by that, they're not putting out consistent content. You'll see someone post a video or two, and then it's almost like they half-heartedly want to go after producing content. They'll film a couple of hunts, but I'm hoping that changes in the near future. I'm hoping more and more people start documenting their seasons, and putting it out there, and because people want to watch that stuff. They want to see how you tackle other people tackle the difficulties of hunting public land. And it's also what's neat about it is these are places that theoretically all of us could go hunt. It's not some $100 ranch somewhere that we'll never see. If we want to go off to Mississippi or Tennessee and hunt, we can.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the beauty of the whole thing about all that. It definitely appeals to me, and it's one of them things where all you got to do is apply for it. You don't necessarily even have to ask for permission because it's yours. So that it definitely helps. Well, I appreciate it, and I appreciate you coming on. Thank you, I guess,
You're welcome. I appreciate you having me on, Luke. I always look forward to talking about turkey, and especially right now. My little switch in my head turned about a month ago, or back in November, I think it switched, and I was ready for deer season and tracking season to end, and turkey season to get here. I don't want to wish my life away, but I'm sure looking forward to turkey season.
All right, I appreciate it, man. I'll let you get back to your day.
I appreciate you having me on today, Luke.
Yep. All right, man. I appreciate it, and I'll. All
right, man. Have a good one.
Take it easy. Thank you for listening to the Publicly Challenged podcast. If you liked this episode, please subscribe on whatever platform it is that you're listening to. Also, you can find us on Instagram at Publicly Challenged, and you can also find us at Publicly Challenged Podcast or publiclychallenged.com. So please reach out to us with any questions, comments, concerns, or maybe you'd even like to be on the show. And once again, thank you so much for listening.